The warning. The Galactic Empire, a coalition of thousands of star systems, had always viewed humanity with contempt. Humans were seen as a minor species, unremarkable and weak in comparison to the great empires that ruled the galaxy. The Empire's vast armies, capable of annihilating entire civilizations, had rarely met resistance. So when Earth joined the ranks of the galactic community, the Empire took little notice. But that would change. The Empire's vast machine of oppression rolled into the Sol system, claiming Earth as just another resource-rich planet to be exploited. It began with the usual methods: diplomatic pressure, economic subjugation, and eventually military might. But humanity was not so easily subdued. Tensions escalated when the Empire's forces occupied a colony on the distant moon of Europa. They believed they could control the human populace through fear and brutality, as they had done with countless other species. But the humans resisted, fighting back with a ferocity that the Empire had not anticipated. Soldiers of the Empire, clad in their indomitable armor, were met with human ingenuity and sheer determination. Guerrilla warfare, sabotage, and relentless resistance marked the beginning of what would become humanity's darkest hour. In retaliation, the Empire decided to send a message that would break humanity's spirit once and for all. On a day that would be etched into the history of the galaxy, the Empire committed an atrocity that shocked even the most hardened of its soldiers. Over 800,000 human children were massacred in cold blood, their lives extinguished in a single, horrifying act of genocide. The Empire believed this would shatter human resolve. Instead, it ignited a firestorm. The news of the massacre spread like wildfire across Earth and its colonies. Grief turned into rage, and that rage demanded justice. The leaders of the United Earth Federation, the governing body of humanity, were left with a choice: surrender to the Empire's overwhelming might, or take a stand that could lead to humanity's extinction. But surrender was never an option. As humanity mourned its lost children, the UEF convened in a secret meeting deep within the subterranean halls of Earth's last stronghold. The President of Earth, a woman known for her stoicism and unyielding resolve, addressed the gathered leaders. Her voice, though calm, carried the weight of 1,000 broken hearts. "We have been pushed to the brink," she began, her gaze piercing through the holographic images of the other leaders. "The Empire believes they can break us by committing the most heinous of crimes. They think we will bow to their terror, that we will cower in fear. But they are wrong. We are not just fighting for our survival. We are fighting for the future of our species, for the memory of every innocent life they have taken." She paused, allowing the gravity of her words to sink in. "We will not forgive. We will not forget. And we will not rest until justice is served. But we must be strategic. We cannot fight the Empire head-on. We are outnumbered, outgunned. But we have something they do not. We have our resolve, our unity, and the element of surprise." The President's plan was audacious. It involved a coordinated strike at the heart of the Empire, a mission that, if successful, could turn the tide of the war. But it was not without risks. The mission would require the best of humanity's soldiers, the most skilled and fearless warriors, to infiltrate the Empire's capital and deliver a message that would shake the galaxy to its core. The mission's leader, Captain Marcus Reaper Kane, was a legend among the UEF's special forces. Known for his cold precision and unwavering loyalty, Kane was the perfect choice for a mission of such importance. But even he knew the odds were against them. "This isn't just about revenge," Kane had said during the mission briefing. "It's about making sure the Empire never forgets who they're dealing with." The night before the mission, Kane visited the memorial erected in honor of the massacred children. It was a simple structure, a symbol of loss and remembrance, but it carried the weight of a species' pain. As he stood there, the memories of his own family, his wife and daughter, who had been among those lost, came flooding back. Kane's resolve hardened. He would not fail them. The mission began under the cover of darkness. The team, composed of the UEF's elite operatives, infiltrated the Empire's defenses with surgical precision. Their objective was to plant a message at the heart of the Empire, a warning that would be broadcast across the galaxy. The message was simple, yet it carried the weight of humanity's fury. "You've massacred our children. Now we're coming for you. Run." As the team penetrated deeper into enemy territory, the tension was palpable. Every corner they turned, every door they breached, brought them closer to their target. They knew that if they were caught, there would be no mercy. The Empire would make an example of them, just as they had with so many others. But failure was not an option. The weight of their mission, the burden of the countless lives lost, drove them forward. Finally, they reached the Empire's central communications hub, a heavily fortified structure that controlled the flow of information across the galaxy. The team moved swiftly, disabling security systems and neutralizing guards with silent efficiency. As Kane and his second-in-command, Lieutenant Sarah Ghost Ramirez, prepared to upload the message, they knew they had only moments before the Empire's forces would converge on their location. "Are you sure about this?" Ramirez asked, her voice steady despite the chaos surrounding them. Kane nodded. "This is our only chance. We send the message, and then we fight our way out. No matter what happens, the galaxy will know what the Empire has done." With a final keystroke, the message was uploaded. The warning was broadcast across every channel, every communication network in the galaxy. The Empire's atrocities were laid bare for all to see, and humanity's warning echoed across the stars. As the team prepared to exfiltrate, the alarms blared. The Empire's forces were closing in, and the final battle was about to begin. The fight for survival. Captain Kane and his team knew they were running out of time. The mission to deliver the message had been successful, but now they were deep behind enemy lines, with the Empire's forces rapidly closing in on their position. The comms were filled with frantic chatter as UEF command relayed the grim reality of their situation. The Empire had mobilized its elite troops, and they were converging on the communications hub. "We need to move now," Kane barked, his voice cutting through the noise as he assessed the situation on his tactical display. The map showed red blips, enemy forces, closing in from all directions. They were outnumbered, outgunned, and the only way out was through a gauntlet of hostile forces. Lieutenant Ramirez, ever the cool-headed strategist, quickly identified their best route. "There's a maintenance tunnel that leads to the sewers. It's not ideal, but it's our best shot at getting out of here alive." Kay nodded, trusting her instincts. "All right, team, we're heading for the tunnels. Stay sharp and keep moving." The team moved with practiced precision, their movements a ballet of lethal efficiency honed by years of combat. The corridors of the communications hub were now a war zone, with blaster fire echoing through the halls. The team engaged the enemy with the ferocity of cornered wolves, using every ounce of their training to stay one step ahead of the Empire's forces. But the Empire's soldiers were not the only threat. The hub's automated defense systems had been activated, and turrets and drones now roamed the halls, indiscriminately targeting anything that moved. The team had to be careful, avoiding detection while staying ahead of the relentless pursuit. As they approached the entrance to the maintenance tunnels, a heavy blast door blocked their path. "Ghost, can you get us through?" Kane asked, his voice tense. Ramirez quickly assessed the door's control panel. "I can override it, but it's going to take a few minutes. We'll have to hold them off until then." Kane nodded, signaling the rest of the team to take up defensive positions. The sound of approaching footsteps echoed down the corridor, growing louder with each passing second. The Empire's soldiers were closing in, and they had no choice but to make a stand. The battle that ensued was fierce and desperate. The team fought with everything they had, their weapons blazing as they repelled wave after wave of enemy soldiers. Each member of the team displayed extraordinary skill and courage, their determination to survive and complete the mission driving them to push beyond their limits. But the Empire's forces were relentless, and the team was gradually being worn down. They were running low on ammunition, and the enemy kept coming. Kane knew they couldn't hold out much longer. He glanced over at Ramirez, who was frantically working to bypass the door's security protocols. Almost there, she shouted over the din of battle, her fingers flying across the control panel. Kane could feel the exhaustion setting in, but he refused to give in. He knew that if they didn't make it out of here, the message they had sent would be their only legacy. And that wasn't enough. Humanity needed its heroes to live on, to continue the fight. Hold the line. Kane roared, rallying his team as they dug in for one final push. The Empire's soldiers were closing in, their blaster fire lighting up the corridor like a deadly storm. Kane and his team returned fire with grim determination, each shot fired with the knowledge that it might be their last. Finally, with a triumphant beep, the blast door began to slide open. "We're in," Ramirez shouted, her voice filled with relief. Kane didn't waste a second. "Go, go, go," he ordered, covering the team's retreat as they scrambled through the opening and into the maintenance tunnels. The team moved quickly through the dimly lit tunnels, the sounds of battle gradually fading behind them. But the danger was far from over. The tunnels were a labyrinthine network of passages, and the Empire would be searching for them. As they navigated the twists and turns, Ramirez pulled up the schematics on her wrist-mounted holo display. "If we keep heading east, we should reach a junction that leads to the sewers. From there, we can make our way to the extraction point." But as they rounded a corner, they came face to face with a squad of Empire soldiers. Both sides were momentarily frozen in surprise, but only for a second. The team reacted with lightning speed, taking down the soldiers in a flurry of gunfire and hand-to-hand combat. But the encounter had cost them precious time, and they knew more enemy forces would be on their trail soon. They finally reached the junction Ramirez had mentioned, but it was blocked by a massive grate. Of course, Kane muttered under his breath, frustrated by the constant obstacles. Ramirez didn't waste any time, quickly setting charges to blow the grate. "This will only take a moment." As the charges detonated, the team rushed through the opening, dropping into the murky waters of the sewers below. The stench was overwhelming, but they pushed through, driven by the knowledge that this was their only way out. The sewers were just as labyrinthine as the tunnels above, and the team had to navigate carefully to avoid getting lost. But even in the relative safety of the sewers, they couldn't let their guard down. The Empire's forces were relentless, and they knew it was only a matter of time before they were found. As they moved deeper into the sewers, the tension was palpable. Every noise, every shadow could be an enemy waiting to strike. But the team pressed on, driven by the knowledge that they had a chance to make it out alive, to continue the fight against the Empire. Finally, after what felt like hours, they reached the extraction point, a hidden chamber where a UEF stealth ship awaited them. As they climbed aboard, the team allowed themselves a moment of relief. They had made it out, against all odds. But Kane knew that their mission was far from over. The message had been sent, but the real fight was just beginning. The Empire would not take humanity's defiance lightly, and the war that was coming would be unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. As the ship lifted off, disappearing into the blackness of space, Kane allowed himself one final thought. The Empire had made a grave mistake. They had awakened a force that would not rest until justice was done. The Empire strikes back. The message Kane's team had sent rippled across the galaxy like a shockwave. Species that had long suffered under the Empire's iron fists suddenly found hope in humanity's defiance. Uprisings and rebellions sparked on dozens of worlds, fueled by the knowledge that the Empire was not invincible. But the Empire was not one to be trifled with. Enraged by humanity's audacity, the Emperor himself ordered a full-scale retaliation. On Earth, the mood was tense. The United Earth Federation had braced for the Empire's response, knowing it would be swift and brutal. The US military forces were mobilized, their ships and soldiers ready to defend their homeworld at all costs. But even with their preparations, they knew they were facing an overwhelming force. The Empire's fleet, a massive armada of warships and dreadnoughts, descended upon the Sol system with terrifying speed. The skies above Earth were soon filled with the dark silhouettes of enemy ships, their weapons primed and ready to strike. The Empire had come to crush humanity once and for all. The UEF's defenses were formidable, but they were no match for the sheer size and firepower of the Empire's fleet. The battle that ensued was cataclysmic, with both sides suffering heavy losses. Earth's orbital defenses, including its powerful planetary shields, held strong for a time, but they were gradually being worn down by the relentless assault. On the ground, the situation was equally dire. The Empire had deployed its ground forces to key locations around the globe, targeting military installations and major cities. The UEF's soldiers fought valiantly, but they were being pushed back on all fronts. The sheer numbers of the Empire's troops seemed endless, and for every soldier they took down, more seemed to take their place. In the midst of the chaos, Captain Kane and his team were once again thrust into the heart of the battle. They had been redeployed to Earth's last line of defense, a heavily fortified base located in the Rocky Mountains. It was here that the UEF had concentrated its remaining forces, hoping to make one final stand. The base was a hive of activity as soldiers, technicians, and commanders scrambled to prepare for the inevitable assault. Kane and his team were given a crucial mission: to protect the base's command center, where the UEF's top brass were coordinating the defense of the planet. If the command center fell, Earth's defenses would crumble, and humanity's last hope would be lost. As the Empire's forces closed in, the tension in the base was palpable. Everyone knew that this was it, the final battle that would determine the fate of humanity. Kane's team took up defensive positions around the command center, their weapons at the ready. They knew that the Empire would throw everything they had at them, and they were prepared to fight to the last man. The assault began with a deafening roar as the Empire's troops launched a full-scale attack on the base. Waves of soldiers, supported by heavy armor and aerial bombardments, descended upon the defenders with ruthless precision. The ground shook with the impact of explosions, and the air was filled with the screams of the dying. Kane's team fought with everything they had, their resolve unshaken despite the overwhelming odds. They were the best of the best, and they knew that failure was not an option. Each member of the team displayed extraordinary courage and skill, taking down enemy soldiers with deadly accuracy and fending off wave after wave of attackers. But the Empire's forces were relentless, and the base's defenses were gradually being worn down. The walls of the command center shook as explosions rocked the facility, and Kane knew that it was only a matter of time before the enemy breached their defenses. As the battle raged on, the UES commanders made a desperate decision. They would initiate a last-ditch counterattack, sending their remaining forces on a suicide mission to strike at the heart of the Empire's fleet. It was a plan born of desperation, but it was their only chance to turn the tide of the battle. Kane's team was tasked with escorting the commanders to the hangar, where they would board the last remaining fleet of UEF fighters. The mission was fraught with danger, as the Empire's troops had already breached the outer defenses and were closing in on the command center. The journey to the hangar was a harrowing one, with Kane's team fighting off enemy soldiers at every turn. The corridors of the base were a maze of destruction, with fires raging and debris littering the ground. The sounds of battle echoed through the halls, a constant reminder of the stakes. As they reached the hangar, the commanders quickly boarded their fighters, the engines roaring to life. Kane and his team provided cover as the fighters launched into the sky, heading straight for the Empire's fleet. It was a suicide mission, but one that could potentially save humanity. The battle in the sky was as fierce as the one on the ground. The UEF's fighters, outnumbered and outgunned, engaged the Empire's ships in a desperate dogfight. Explosions lit up the sky as ships were torn apart, their debris raining down on the battlefield below. Back on the ground, Kane's team continued to hold the line, fighting with a ferocity born of desperation. The Empire's soldiers were closing in on the command center, and it was clear that the base would not hold for much longer. But even in the face of certain defeat, Kane and his team refused to give up. Just as the situation seemed hopeless, a sudden explosion ripped through the sky. One of the UEF's fighters had managed to breach the defenses of the Empire's flagship, delivering a crippling blow to the heart of the fleet. The explosion sent shockwaves through the Empire's forces, causing chaos and confusion. With their flagship destroyed, the Empire's fleet began to falter. The remaining UEF fighters, emboldened by their success, launched a renewed assault, targeting the Empire's remaining ships. The tide of the battle was beginning to turn. On the ground, the Empire's soldiers, now leaderless and disorganized, began to retreat. Kane's team seized the opportunity, pushing back the remaining enemy forces and securing the command center. The base, battered and bruised, had held. As the dust settled, the UEF's forces began to regroup. The battle had been won, but at a great cost. The ground was littered with the bodies of the fallen, and the skies were filled with the wreckage of ships, but humanity had survived. Kane looked around at his team, battered but alive. They had done the impossible, holding the line against the might of the Empire. But they knew that this was only the beginning. The war was far from over, and the Empire would not rest until humanity was crushed. As the UES commanders began to assess the situation, they knew that they had been given a second chance. The destruction of the Empire's flagship had dealt a significant blow to their enemy, but it would not be enough to win the war. They needed to regroup, rebuild, and prepare for the battles to come. But for now, they had won a victory, and that was enough. The final countdown. The destruction of the Empire's flagship sent shockwaves throughout the galaxy. For the first time in its history, the Galactic Empire had suffered a significant defeat at the hands of a defiant species. A species that had once been considered insignificant. The Emperor was furious, his wrath echoing through the halls of the Imperial Palace. The defeat was a stain on his otherwise spotless record, and he demanded retribution. Back on Earth, the mood was one of cautious optimism. The UEF had won a hard-fought victory, but they knew that the Empire's response would be swift and brutal. The destruction of the flagship had bought them some time, but it was only a matter of time before the Empire regrouped and launched another assault. The UES leaders convened in an emergency meeting, their faces grim as they discussed their next steps. They knew that they couldn't withstand another full-scale attack like the one they had just survived. The Empire's forces were vast, and their resources seemingly endless. But the UEF had one advantage, the element of surprise. "We need to take the fight to them," General Mitchell declared, his voice firm. "We can't just sit here and wait for them to come back. We need to hit them where it hurts, disrupt their supply lines, and force them to divide their forces." The plan was ambitious, but it was their best shot. The UEF's fleet, though battered, was still operational, and they had a number of elite special forces teams ready to be deployed. The goal was to launch a series of coordinated strikes on key Imperial installations, crippling their ability to wage war and buying Earth more time. Captain Kane and his team were assigned to one of the most critical missions, an assault on an Imperial shipyard located deep within enemy territory. The shipyard was responsible for producing a significant portion of the Empire's fleet, and taking it out would be a major blow to their war effort. The mission was dangerous, with little room for error. The shipyard was heavily guarded, and the team would need to infiltrate it undetected, plant charges on key structural points, and get out before the entire place went up in flames. As Kane and his team prepared for the mission, the gravity of the situation weighed heavily on them. They knew that failure was not an option. If they were caught or killed, the Empire would redouble its efforts to crush humanity. But they were ready. They had fought against impossible odds before, and they would do so again. The journey to the shipyard was tense, with the team traveling in a cloaked transport ship to avoid detection. The vast expanse of space was eerily quiet, the stars distant and cold. But Kane's mind was focused on the task ahead. There was no room for doubt or hesitation. As they approached the shipyard, the transport ship dropped out of hyperspace, and the team moved into action. The shipyard was a massive structure, floating in the void like a mechanical behemoth. Lights flickered along its surface, and the distant shapes of Imperial ships could be seen patrolling the area. Kane and his team donned their EVA suits and exited the transport ship, using thrusters to maneuver toward the shipyard. They moved with practiced precision, avoiding the sensors and cameras that dotted the structure. Their objective was clear: the main reactor core, located deep within the heart of the shipyard. The team breached the outer hull and made their way through the dark, labyrinthine corridors. The shipyard was a maze of steel and wires, with the constant hum of machinery reverberating through the walls. But the team was focused, moving with silent efficiency. As they neared the reactor core, they encountered resistance, Imperial security forces patrolling the area. The team took them out quickly and quietly, leaving no trace of their presence. But the closer they got to their objective, the more heavily guarded it became. Finally, they reached the reactor core, a massive chamber filled with towering machinery and glowing energy conduits. The team quickly set to work, planting charges on the critical points that would cause a chain reaction, destroying the entire shipyard. But as they were about to leave, they encountered an unexpected complication: a group of Imperial engineers entering the chamber for routine maintenance. The team was forced to hide, waiting for the engineers to leave. But time was running out, and they knew that the longer they waited, the greater the risk of being discovered. Kane made a quick decision. "We can't wait any longer. We need to take them out." The team moved into action, taking down the engineers with swift precision. But the commotion alerted the security forces, and alarms began to blare throughout the shipyard. They had been discovered. "Get to the extraction point now," Kane ordered, as the team sprinted through the corridors, the sound of pursuing footsteps echoing behind them. The charges were set to detonate in a matter of minutes, and they needed to be far away when it happened. The team reached the outer hull and launched themselves into space, using their thrusters to propel them toward the waiting transport ship. The shipyard was now a hive of activity, with Imperial ships scrambling to respond to the intrusion. As the team boarded the transport ship, the charges detonated, and the shipyard was consumed in a massive explosion. The shockwave rippled through space, sending debris flying in all directions. Kane and his team watched as the shipyard was reduced to a field of wreckage, a symbol of the Empire's vulnerability. But the mission had come at a cost. Ramirez had been hit during the escape, their suit damaged and leaking oxygen. Kane and the team worked frantically to stabilize her, but they knew that they needed to get back to Earth as quickly as possible. The transport ship jumped to hyperspace, and the team braced themselves for the journey home. The mission had been a success, but the war was far from over. The Empire would not take this blow lightly, and they knew that the fight ahead would be even more brutal. As they sped through the stars, Kane looked at his team, battered but alive. They had struck a blow against the Empire, but at great cost. The war was escalating, and they would need to be ready for whatever came next. The Empire's last stand. The destruction of the Imperial shipyard was a turning point in the war. The UEF's daring strike had dealt a significant blow to the Empire's ability to wage war, and it had sent shockwaves throughout the galaxy. Rebellions and uprisings spread like wildfire, as oppressed species saw an opportunity to rise against their tyrannical rulers. But the Empire was not finished. Enraged by the attack, the Emperor himself took direct control of the war effort, mobilizing the full might of the Imperial fleet for a final, devastating assault on Earth. This was to be the Empire's last stand, Either they would crush humanity once and for all, or they would fall. On Earth, the mood was grim. The UEF had won a few victories, but they knew that the Empire's retaliation would be swift and merciless. The final battle was approaching, and everyone knew that the fate of humanity hung in the balance. The UEF's fleet, battered and bruised, was all that stood between Earth and total annihilation. Every available ship was brought into the fight, from state-of-the-art warships to hastily retrofitted civilian vessels. It was a desperate, last-ditch effort to hold the line against the overwhelming force of the Empire's armada. Captain Kane and his team were given a new mission, one that could tip the scales in humanity's favor. They were to infiltrate the Empire's flagship, the Emperor's Wrath, and take out the Emperor himself. It was a mission of unparalleled danger, but if they succeeded, it could decapitate the Empire's leadership and throw their forces into disarray. The team boarded a stealth ship and made their way toward the Emperor's Wrath, slipping past the outer defenses of the Imperial fleet. The ship was a behemoth, bristling with weapons and guarded by an elite force of soldiers. Getting in would be the easy part. Getting out would be another matter entirely. As they approached the ship, the tension was palpable. The fate of Earth rested on their shoulders, and they knew that this was a mission from which they might not return. But they were ready. They had faced impossible odds before, and they would do so again. The team breached the hull of the Emperor's Wrath and made their way through the ship's corridors, avoiding patrols and security cameras. The ship was a labyrinth of steel and wires, with the constant hum of machinery echoing through the halls. But the team was focused, moving with silent efficiency. As they neared the Emperor's throne room, they encountered resistance, elite Imperial guards, trained to protect their leader at all costs. The team engaged them in a fierce battle, the clash of weapons and the sound of blaster fire filling the air. It was a brutal fight, but the team emerged victorious, though not unscathed. Finally, they reached the throne room, a massive chamber filled with towering pillars and ornate decorations. The Emperor sat on his throne, surrounded by a contingent of guards. He was a figure of cold, calculating evil, his eyes filled with hatred as he gazed upon the intruders. "You dare to challenge me?" the Emperor snarled, his voice dripping with venom. "We're here to end this war," Kane replied, his voice steady, "and it ends with you." The battle that followed was fierce and intense, with the team fighting desperately against the Emperor and his guards. The Emperor was a formidable opponent, wielding a dark power that seemed almost otherworldly. But the team fought with everything they had, knowing that the fate of humanity depended on their success. In the end, it was Kane who delivered the final blow, striking down the Emperor with a well-placed shot. The Emperor's lifeless body slumped to the ground, and for a moment there was silence. The war was over. But the team had little time to celebrate. The ship was in chaos, with the death of the Emperor sending shockwaves through the crew. Alarms blared, and the ship's self-destruct sequence was activated. The team had only minutes to escape. They sprinted through the corridors, dodging enemy fire and explosions as they made their way to the extraction point. The ship was falling apart around them, debris raining down as the self-destruct sequence counted down. With seconds to spare, the team boarded their stealth ship and launched into space, just as the Emperor's Wrath exploded in a massive fireball. The shockwave rippled through the void, sending debris flying in all directions. The team watched in awe as the Empire's flagship was reduced to a field of wreckage, a symbol of the Empire's defeat. The war was finally over. The Galactic Empire, once feared and invincible, had been brought to its knees by the defiance and courage of humanity. As the team returned to Earth, they were greeted as heroes. The people of Earth rejoiced, celebrating their victory over the tyrannical empire. Rebellions across the galaxy gained momentum, and soon the Empire's once vast dominion crumbled, freeing countless species from its oppressive rule. Captain Kane and his team had accomplished the impossible. They had stood against the might of the Galactic Empire and emerged victorious. The war had taken its toll, and many lives had been lost, but in the end, humanity had prevailed. As the celebrations continued, Kane stood alone, gazing up at the stars. The galaxy was a different place now, filled with new possibilities and challenges. But one thing was certain: humanity had earned its place among the stars, and they would not be underestimated again. The words of an ancient human warrior came to mind, a fitting epitaph for the war they had just fought. "We few, we happy few, we band of brothers, for he today that sheds his blood with me shall be my brother." Humanity had faced the darkness and emerged into the light, stronger than ever. The galaxy would never forget the day that Earth stood tall and defied an empire.